Church, as I shared with you, we've got something exciting to look forward to now in our teaching time. As many of you know, if you don't know, we've been doing a series called Not a Fan, where we've looked at how so often in our lives and in our Christian walk, maybe even if you're not a Christian, maybe you're not even a follower or a believer, but often we can look at Jesus, his life and ministry, and we can think, you know what, Jesus, yet he was a good guy. He was an awesome guy. He did cool things, and he seemed to love and serve, and you know what, that's good, that's cool. But as we look through the scriptures and we read in the Gospels, whenever Jesus spoke to people, his challenge to them was to become followers of him. He never called or never wanted fans. He never wanted admirers. Rather, every time he spoke to people, he challenged them and he said, "Will you follow me?" Over the last few weeks, we've broken down what that following could look like. We realized that one of the prerequisites for following is that you're a sinner. And that was good news for all of us, hey? Because we're all sinners. We also realized that often a prerequisite for being a follower was being an unbeliever. Most of the time, the people that followed Jesus didn't actually believe in him. They were just curious in what he was doing, and so they followed him. But somewhere in that journey, somewhere in that process, something changed for them. And so that's why we invite all of you, and Jesus invites everyone, hey, come, follow me. We discovered a number of other things along the way, but today we wanted to just continue this series by hearing from a few of our young people. And today they're going to share a bit of their story, a bit of their journey in this whole concept of fan or follower. And so first up, I'd like to invite Richard, and we give it over to you guys, man. Thank you for being willing to share.
Happy Sabbath, Papsda. Happy Sabbath. Well, firstly, my name is Richard, and I actually don't know what I'm doing up here. I mean, I walked into your front doors for the first time because I was interested in one of your ladies, and then I married her, and then I'm up here. So I'm obviously really, really privileged and honored to speak to you all. And so yeah, just like Norman said, over the past few weeks, we've been talking about the idea of not being a fan, but a follower of Jesus. And while I was reading this book, Not a Fan, I've put together a few thoughts to share to you all. In the 5th chapter, Kyle talks about the fan club. Now, the fan club is made out of 2 groups. One group, he says, is like the Sadducees. Now, just put up your hands if you've been brought up in the church, if you were born into the church. Just can I see a raise of hands? Cool. That's quite a lot of us, and I'm the same. So the Sadducees were a group of people in Jesus' time who were born into the faith. It was never really something they chose for themselves. For these people, faith is more about honoring the family history and reputation rather than giving their hearts to Jesus. The other group are like the Pharisees. The Pharisees were people who measured their faith by how much they knew and how well they followed the law. They were very good at saying the right things and doing the right things, but at the same time, they were hiding who they really were. And when I read that, I tried to figure out which group I fit into, the most. And as I kept trying to think in my head, the more I realized that I actually really fit into both. You see, I grew up a Seventh-day Adventist. My father and my mother were Seventh-day Adventists when I was born. And yeah, that's all I knew. That's all my family knew. I have 3 sisters as well as 2 brothers, and we would just follow our parents around. Our parents would go to singing practice because they sung in a group together. My father was part of the elders team, so we would go to his elders meeting. My mother was a deaconess, so we'd go to her meetings, and we went to the business meetings Obviously, we weren't listening, but yeah, we were there. And so obviously our parents were really involved in the church. And so they encouraged us to do the same. And so we did. We were part of the choir. We attended all the youth programs. We sung in the praise and worship team. And we attended Pathfinders like every good Seventh-day Adventist kid did. And so, yeah. As a kid, at that time, I didn't really think too much about what I was doing. I didn't make a conscious decision for why I went to these things, but I just went along because my family was there. And then I grew up, and I guess it's in those later teenage years where you figure out that you have a little bit of power to decide whether you want to stay or whether you want to go or just stick around and do the church thing or not. And for me, I decided to stay. I liked coming to church, saw my friends, my family was there, and yeah, but the big reason why I decided to stay was because I was really scared of what people would say about me, what people would say about my family. If I were to leave. And that was a big, really, really, really big decision of why I stayed in church. And so in the process of staying in church, I learned how to do the right things. I learned how to say the right things. I learned how to wear the right things. And for me, honestly, church became a lot like role play. I do my own thing during the week, and then when I came to church, I'd put on a nice shirt, put on a nice tie, put on some pants, and just walk into church and be a totally different person to who I was in the weekend. Yeah, that affected me in the way that because I saw myself in that Christian role, that's how I viewed other people's Christian walk. So I based and I judged other people's Christian walk depending on what they would wear, how they would act, how they would talk. Just a really, really messed up concept of church and a real relationship with God. And it wasn't until a random guy walked in off the street, just completely random. We knew nothing about him. No one invited him to church. He just walked in one day, and the preacher was talking, and we'd see him the next week, and then the next week, and then the next week. And then we saw him in the baptismal font. And then before you knew it, he was off on a plane to Australia to study theology at Avondale College. And to me, I was shocked. I didn't know what to think, why he would do that, or how a life-changing experience could happen to him in such a short amount of time, whereas I was sitting there my whole life in church and haven't experienced anything close to something like that. And so I was really confused. And then that's when it dawned on me that a relationship with Jesus is more than just playing church, which is what I was doing. It's more than what you say, it's more than what you do, and it's definitely more than what you wear. So I started focusing more on what was on the inside rather than the outside. Not just doing and saying things, but I was trying my best to practice what I preach and live it out through my everyday life. I would get involved in church because of relationship and not to get a relationship with God. I started being intentional about my relationship with God, not letting it be numbered by routine and repetition. And that's what I want for you, Papsda. That every time you come into the church, He is your focus. And to live out your faith every day, just like a real follower would. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Kristen, and some of you may know me from the Jungle, Sabbath School, or 360, or see me on stage doing dances for my sister Brie. I'm not very comfortable on stage and speaking in public, so I was a bit hesitant to do this at first as it's out of my comfort zone. So I just started with reading the book and writing down some notes of what I thought of it and then took it from there. As I started reflecting, I found it quite interesting and thought-provoking. So I wrote down a few things at the end of each chapter, like main points, things I agreed with, things maybe I didn't agree with, and topics that I have questions or doubts about. I've chosen to share a few of my thoughts with you today. And as much as I'd rather be sitting in a pew listening to someone else speak, I've come to the conclusion that the difference between me being a fan and me being a follower might be me standing here, taking the opportunity to speak to you right now. After reading this book and engaging in this sermon series, I've been introduced to what the term follower of Jesus can mean. A follower is someone who believes in Jesus, has a real relationship with him, and will do anything that they need to do, even give up anything that they need to follow him. A fan is someone who has all the knowledge about Jesus, the church, the rules, and God, and who says they are followers of Jesus if they are asked, but their lives may not quite match up with that. I've been raised in the church all my life, so I know all about Jesus, God, the Bible, and I believe it. I have a few questions about a few things, and I'm looking forward to finding out the answers, but I have a real, not perfect, could be better, relationship with Jesus. But if I were to confess my struggle, it has to do with the third part of my summarized definition of a follower. It's the being willing to do anything or give up anything that I need to follow him. This is the part of being a follower that scares me. This conversation about the difference between a fan and a follower suggests that following Jesus is not always comfortable. You have to get up, go out, and actually do something. Truthfully, this doesn't sit well with me. I like things to be comfortable and safe. So that's honestly what scares me about following. I've been under the impression that your life has to be turned upside down and you have to lose everything or something traumatic has to happen to you for you to be classed as a real follower. There seems to be a lot of examples of this in the Bible. Because of the things I've experienced in my life, hard things, traumatic things, I'd honestly prefer not to have to go through any of that. But I had a conversation recently that suggested God wants us to have every good thing that we have. However, when things are not so good, that may be the point at which we realize who God is and what's most important. I'm not sure where I sit with this one, but it's on my mind. I'm hoping maybe it doesn't take the drastic things to happen to be classed as a real follower. I see people who claim to be followers, but their actions do not align with their words. Then there are those people who I believe actually do have a real relationship with God and live that in their everyday lives. This is the kind of relationship that I'd like, and I'll try to work towards it every day. I like the idea that being a follower isn't a once-in-a-lifetime, once-made, always-made type of choice. That maybe following is about me choosing to follow today, and then waking up tomorrow and choosing the same thing again. Thank you.
Happy Sabbath, everyone. My name's Brittany, and it's an absolute honour and privilege to be standing here to talk to you today about being a fan or follower. When Kira approached me about talking today, I honestly thought it was going to be straightforward and fairly simple. She said, I want you to share your thoughts or your testimony or an experience about being a fan or follower at the end of the series. She said, here's the book, have a read, and actively participate and listen to the series. I was like, sure, why not? This should be fine. However, what turned into something that I thought would be easy, I found very hard. See, I never really thought I had a story or a testimony to share until recently. Growing up, I attended a conservative Samoan church in Wellington, as my parents wanted to instill some cultural awareness and be exposed to the Samoan language. Fridays was a special day as it wasn't really known as Friday or the end of the week. It was the get ready for Sabbath day, meaning we just knew to go home straight after school, don't bother asking about attending a friend's house, because we knew we had to clean. When I mean clean, I mean everything. It meant bathrooms, vacuuming, weeding the gardens, cleaning the cars, the fridge, the cupboard, you name it, just everything. It also meant getting our Sabbath clothes ready. Bearing in mind, I attended a Samoan church. Picking the most appropriate clothes was always hard. Right length always failed every time because I was too tall for skirts and dresses. If I was to wear spaghetti straps, I had to put a cardigan on, and absolutely no crop tops, which was quite an in thing back then, and everything just failed for appropriate length. Opening Sabbath is where you'd recite John 14, verse 1 to 3, Psalms 23, my grandparents' personal favorite, Exodus 20, verse 8 to 11, and my favorite, John 3:16. A typical Sabbath day consisted of 7 a.m. rise to start cooking for lunch, 8:45 for mum to leave and play the organ, 9:30 had to attend Sabbath school, 11 a.m. divine service, which on a good day would end at 1 p.m. And this part of the rules, you had to sit with your parents, no running around, no talking, no food, no laughing, practically no breathing. These weren't my parents' rules. They were the old Samoan elders and deacons. What followed was a long sermon. What followed was a big combined lunch, 3 p.m. AWISE, which is the Adventist Youth Service, 5 p.m. Parents Committee meetings, and 7:30 games. Then I would slot in Adventurers and Pathfinders somewhere in there. I guess you could say this was my family routine every Sabbath for the first 12 to 13 years of my life. But I guess up until not very long, this was my definition or understanding of being a follower. It wasn't until 5 years ago when this whole routine started to collapse a little. All these rules and guidelines that I was taught as a guide for getting ready for Sabbath, or how I thought Sabbath was meant to be or look like, started to have no value or importance in my life. However, here's what I love about my upbringing. My parents epitomized devotion and commitment, and they have their own genuine relationship with God. They have instilled in me the same values and longings that now has become the foundation that I am building the rest of my walk upon. But for a while, those routines were the whole deal. I didn't know there was more to it. I began to go to church because I've always done it every Sabbath. I went to Sabbath school because I had to attend because it was my only ride. I was in Pathfinders because I had to be. Just a whole lot of I had tos. It was this DTR, defining the relationship moment, where I believe I was unconsciously following the wrong targets. I was following the religious practices and rules of Christ. In Matthew 23, it talked about the Sadducees. You had to be born into the faith, had to be part of your heritage. And I had become like the Sadducees, unconsciously honoring my heritage and upbringing, my routines, the rules, but without surrendering my whole heart. It wasn't until last year, 360 Mountaintop Camp, where I had not another DTR moment, but DTR weekend, talking about vulnerability and fear. I was personally challenged for the first time to really think and reflect on my relationship with God. This enabled me to revisit the issues of why everything I once did, believed, and practiced suddenly ceased. I had allowed the rules, practices to take precedent over my relationship with God. Therefore, I was standing in my lane, but firing at the wrong target. So simple, yet when we fall under worshipping the idea of religion, we are completely missing the target. To follow Jesus, I have found the obedience to come from the inside, and the submission to what God wants from our lives flows naturally out of the relationship. So now I'm allowing relationship to be the difference in my life. The difference between rule keeping, Holy Spirit obeying. The difference between a fan and a follower. And I have to say, I am loving the difference.
Happy Sabbath, everyone. My name is Jeremiah, and I've got a bit of a blocked nose, so I hope you can understand me. At the beginning of this series, which was about 6 weeks ago, Kira approached us as a group and was like, can you read the book, listen to the sermons, and think and where you consider yourself? So then you might be able to share it with our church family. And I was like, oh yeah, sounds good enough. I'm a uni student. I have to critique books all the time. So I started. And upon first opening the book, Not a Fan, and reading the very first line, which stated, "Are you a follower of Jesus?" And just like most born and raised Christians would, I kind of just glazed over it and just wanted to move on with the rest of the book. Not because I thought it was a dumb question. Okay, maybe I did at first. Because to me, it was a no-brainer. I was like, of course I'm a follower of Jesus. I have been my whole life. Yeah. And I would say the chances are pretty good. Oh, no, sorry. And the very next line that followed was, I would say the chances are pretty good that you just skipped over that question in the book from the author. You may have read it, but I doubt you carried much weight or had any real impact. And I was just like, okay, I wasn't expecting that. It was all I could think. And from then on, it was just wake-up call after wake-up call. Initially, I thought this was going to be your typical Christian book that made you feel special and good about yourself. Not a Fan was the total opposite, far, far from a safe and soothing read. I would say I'm a pretty good guy and I abide by all the commandments, and I'm a pretty educated Seventh-day Adventist. Did all the levels in Pathfinders, all the levels in Adventurers, and grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist church system. So I thought I was pretty educated about the Bible. But Idleman, the author of the book, brought me face to face with some of the unsettling truths about myself, and even some scarier demands from Jesus. The idea of this entire series has been Jesus wants follower, not fans. And I'm just going to share just a couple of the many points that for me really hit home. First, I was confronted by the following questions, and for me these were the point of true, honest diagnosis of whether I was a follower or standing in the bleachers with the fans. So right now I just want to throw these questions at you on the screen, and I just want you to answer them for yourselves and be honest. The first one was, for what do you sacrifice money? The Bible says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where you spend your time and money shows the true desires of your heart. I had to really think about this question, because my first answer was, yeah, I pay tithe. But the majority of my money doesn't go towards, I guess, the things I know God wants for me. The next question is, when you're hurt, where do you go for comfort? When you experience pain, where do you turn? Is it your parents or your spouse? Do you bury yourself in work, turn to the refrigerator, or like me, I just want to run as far away as I can? Where do you turn for comfort? The next question, what disappoints or frustrates you the most? When we feel overwhelmed with disappointment, it often reveals something that has become too important. It could be something significant as losing your job, or as insignificant as losing a ball game. When we find that those things have the power to determine who we are and what kind of day we have, it very well may be evidence that something is more important than it should be. I just want to show a little illustration from the book. I want you to imagine this. A child who is excited to go fishing with his father. They go out fishing, but as the day goes on, the fish just aren't biting. The more time passes, the more frustrated and disappointed the father becomes. On the drive home, he is silent, but clearly upset. Isn't this an indication that the most important part of that day was not for the father spending time with his son, but to catch fish? Do you see how excessive disappointment and constant frustration can reveal a heart's true passion? You may need some help answering this question, and if you do, I'd just like you to ask a family member or very close friend, because they will be honest with you. The next question that really hit home was, what is it that really excites you? Like the things that disappoint us, the things that excite us can also point to something or someone that is in competition with God. I would like to read another illustration. The author of the book says, recently I was watching a college football game on TV when my 12-year-old daughter came and said, I've never seen you so excited. She has seen him baptize new believers. She saw my recreation to the birth of her baby brother. She has seen me take her out for many daddy-daughter dates, but she never has seen me more excited than watching a college football game. Ouch. is what I would think if I was a preacher and my daughter said that to me. So after this, I myself am grateful for the clarity and the boldness to write a book that challenged me to examine myself and my motives, and in the author's words, take up my cross daily and pursue the God I proclaim to love. Not as a fan, but now as a true follower. I am also glad our church as a whole can be challenged with these thoughts and wrestle with our relationship enough to recognize where we sit, fan or follower. So I would just like to leave you with a verse that challenged me the most from this book. 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5. Examine yourselves to see whether you are in faith. Test yourselves, or do you not realize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is in you? So Papsda, are we fans or are we followers? Or are we somewhere in between? Today, it might just be about knowing what you are. Tomorrow, it's about taking a step closer to where you want to be or who you want to be. My prayer is that we all may do the same and unite as a church of followers, because I think we'd all agree that God deserves more than enthusiastic admirers.